Who holds a key in these negotiations right now, and can we expect a general outline of a deal soon, or will it be postponed again?
Well, I think so. I think what's almost inevitable now, there's going to be a deal. The election of Joe Biden, in a sense, was the thing that pulled this all together. The idea that the UK could go its own way in a cliff edge Brexit was just a non-starter. And obviously the Prime Minister is now in a very weakened position. He's lost Dominic Cummings. There's political issues about whether he should have fired his Home Secretary. So politically, the idea that he could go alone to a catastrophic Brexit failure, I think, is gone. So I think maybe what we'll see will be, maybe this thing will be pushed off a little while. Maybe they'll change the date. But I think inevitably, as I always suspected, I think we've got a new term. What's the new term? BINO, Brexit in name only, because that's essentially what we're going to see. It's not going to be an enormous change. It was so crucial with the relationship with America. It was made clear by Joe Biden that it was never going to be on the cards to sort of scrap the Irish peace accords. There's issues now with inevitability in Scotland that if you go along the road of deep Brexit, then we're going to pull aside. So the forces on Boris Johnson to have a deal were always there. And he didn't hold any of the cards. He never did. And the Europeans, as ever, held all the cards and have forced him to come to the table. And I think that's where we are. It always seemed inevitable. As I've said with you guys many times.
Brexit in name only, how has that really, the dynamics of Brexit changed, of the negotiations changed because of the coronavirus pandemic and what the UK economy is going through, and perhaps how that's affected public opinion?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the idea that you would, with this combination of an economic crisis, with a pandemic and lockdowns that are going on. I mean, in a sense, it's like I said, there's so much going on. There's the pandemic, there's local lockdowns, there's an issue where the Chancellor of the Exchequer next week is going to go and talk about whether he's going to impose a public sector pay freeze. The Governor of the Bank of England said that the pandemic is going to be much less serious an impact on the economy than potential Brexit would be. And in a sense, the only argument has really come down now to how horrible effect a serious Brexit will be. And so those things combined together have just meant that he has no cards. The idea that you would impose some crazy thing when lots of trucks are sitting in Kent waiting to get across the border with this giant pandemic going on just makes no sense. And I think the House of Lords actually have been making that very clear to the British Parliament, and Boris is in a lot of trouble.
What more can the Bank of England do? Because, as you rightly point out, we wouldn't have said this, a year or even 8-9 months ago. But Brexit seems to be the least of their worries right now.
Well, certainly the economy, again, seems to be slowing with potential potentially a bigger slowing coming. And compared with when I was at the bank in 2008, despite the fact that the Bank of England missed the Great Recession, even 6 months after it started, at least they had some room to maneuver. They could cut interest rates from 550 to a half. Well, now they're at 0.1. Even if they were to go negative, they're not going to go a lot negative. They might go from 0.1 to 0.25, minus 0.25 or something. I mean, the question is, what really can they do? They tried last week to do more quantitative easing, last month to increase the amount of quantitative easing, and they're having to deal with the fact that there was a leak about it as well, which is pretty embarrassing. So I think the bank is now in a position where it absolutely needs the fiscal authorities to step in and help them, and Sunak has done pretty well up till now, but he may have got cold feet. So if he gets cold feet and backs off, it's straight back to the Bank of England to try and start buying assets and do all kinds of things. But that doesn't look really very, very, very easy for them. So they're really on the front lines now.
Danny, we also heard in the last sort of few minutes or so the confirmation that the transition process has been finally triggered in the US, it seems, after these weeks of protracted back and forth and uncertainty, and these legal challenges, which I should say are still on foot across a lot of states, being fought by the Trump administration, the Trump campaign, I should say. Does this give you a bit more optimism about the potential handling of the pandemic in the US now that finally some of those funds can be released to begin the pandemic task force and the pretty big, economic as well as public health crisis they have ahead of them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I certainly do feel that. I mean, if you look today, you've seen this transition going on, the releasing of funds and the announcement of who's going to who's going to be the Secretary of State, who's going to do intelligence. And they all look to be consummate professionals, and the world and the markets took a breather. And then later in the day, I thought it was fantastic news. Janet Yellen got announced as Treasury Secretary. Can I tell you a little story? Once, about a year ago, I was in her office and we were chatting about her time at the Fed. And she said to me one thing, which I thought was great. She said, the only mistake I really made was at my first press conference in answering a question. So I think she's fantastic. President of the San Francisco Fed, chairman of the Council of Advisors, chairman of the Fed, board governor, great economist. I think in a way the markets are sitting thinking, gosh, transition's coming. And I think you said about the legal cases, actually the legal cases now appear to basically have fizzled out. I think that it's now 1 for 34, and they don't really seem to have anywhere to go. And what's happened, interestingly, is the markets have treated this very calmly. Markets up today, and I think this feels like suddenly that the change is coming. And I think that's with Janet at the tiller, I would be very pleased. I've known her for a very long time, and she's a fantastic, steady hand choice.